we're not only just doing swaps, but we're doing like lending, borrowing, vaults, LPing, and so forth, and claiming rewards. So I think the ultimate game here would be who has the most amount of actions, if available, if the conviction is intent will abstract all of the logic of how to interact with the chain away, right? That's what we're building inside of Enso. So we're actually building a network, and this network will abstract and standardize all different DeFi actions across all AVM chains.
Welcome to the Deus Ex Down podcast.
Welcome everybody to another Deus Ex DAO episode. In this episode, we're going to chat about DeFi aggregation with Enzo. We have Connor as a guest, and with me is my co-host Cerberus. Hey Cerberus, how are you doing?
Hello. All good, sir. All good. How are you?
Also good. Yeah, we have two people on the call who just came back from Denver. I think we both had a blast, but let's focus in on DeFi and on-chain activity in this episode again. So welcome, Connor from Enzo. Could you give a little bit an introduction about yourself and how you came into crypto space and basically how you ended up with Enzo?
Sure, thanks for having me on today. So I'm Connor, the founder of Enso Finance. For those who've never heard of Enso before, we aggregate different DeFi primitives and put it under one API. I've been full-time Ethereum development since 2016, and I had my first, let's say, exposure to crypto in the early 2011, 2012 by running large bot farms for World of Warcraft and also RuneScape. Prior to starting Enso, I built some cold storage, hot storage, fully collateralized stablecoin with the Swiss franc stored in the Swiss National Bank, secondary exchange, multi-sig, and so forth for a fully regulated and licensed digital asset bank in Switzerland. Looking forward to the conversation today.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think we're going to chat a lot about like the DeFi aggregation. I think Intense is like a major theme in this. And in the last few years, we realized that the UX for crypto just sucks for the average user. So you've seen that with the hot cold wallet product you've been building probably, but we want to abstract away a lot more different actions for these users. So I think what would be good is to maybe start with a definition of Intense from you and basically how Enzo's product tries to help users with their DeFi Intense and how it improves the UX for them.
Yeah, the best way I like to describe Intense is shortcuts of blockchain. Being able to go from point A to point B without caring what is required to be able to get to your end destination. So for example, if you're flying from Zurich to Berlin, you don't care about the regulations, you don't care about all of the hiring of employees, you don't care about the gas refueling, you don't care about all of these individual steps to be able to get to your end destination. These are ultimately what intents are, saying I have A and I want B, abstract all of this logic away to solvers underneath. I find intent nowadays is a very vague term. Intents imply intentions. It's so large and kind of unnecessary to a certain degree, but for me the definition is more I have A and I want B and I don't care how to get there. Now what we do underneath the Enso is we solve some of these intents. So we're a solver in CowSwap. If you go to CowSwap and you want to enter a DeFi position, let's say for example a Beefy vault, that requires an Aura vault, that requires a Balancer vault, that requires 3 tokens. Before intents, you would need to go to 4 different interfaces and do roughly 8-9 different transactions. And what we do underneath is we directly route into all of these different DeFi protocols in one transaction. We also provide a service to LiFi and many other customers as well, so their customers can directly integrate with DeFi protocols from day one.
Thanks for the introduction, Connor. Yeah, so I guess that many of you already know me, that I'm, besides being a core team at Deus Ex DAO, I'm also head of DeFi at LiFi, and I know Connor very well. But Connor, like, this is the first time when I've heard that you've run bot farms for Warcraft. Like, what's that all about?
Yeah, I mean, it's in some podcasts, it's in podcasts. Yeah, I mean, I was a big gamer whenever I was younger. That's how I got into coding, actually, was how could I maximize how much gold and levels I had in these accounts while I was going to high school. So whenever I was at high school, I'd be running bot farms and writing custom scripts during the night, so they would run during the day, and they would level up all my accounts for me. So I could go back and I could go to better dungeons, play better PvP, go into 2v2s in the arena, and obviously go to Al-Qarid and RuneScape for some duel arena. So that's kind of how I got into coding, actually. And from there, learned about crypto purely because I was so young that I wasn't able to, let's say, transfer funds into a bank account by selling online accounts. So it was purely through Bitcoin back in the day.
It seems like all the OGs in the space have a background either in games, poker. I guess it's only me. Like, I was just going out on a bicycle and talking to trees by myself, which I know that it is kind of autistic somehow. Many of my friends are still, joking about this, but yeah, I didn't have that many friends when I was a kid. But yeah, anyways, so you said that you are a solver for CowSwap. So you are a solver. Are you also capturing MEV? And can you go more into what a solver for one of the top dexes out there means?
Sure, maybe let's take a step back. What does it mean of an intent protocol like CowSwap? So a couple of years ago, if you wanted to trade a token, let's say you wanted to buy Wi-Fi token with Uni token, you would go to Uniswap interface and you would only buy through Uniswap pools. Then it kind of went over to DEX aggregators such as 1inch, Paraswap, and so forth, and 0x, who built their own routing algos inside. So if you went to their interface and you wanted to go from Wi-Fi to Uni, it would check many different DEXs to get you the most optimal route. Now, phase 3 is kind of where we are now of intents. On CowSwap, if you want to go from Wi-Fi, token A, to token B of Uni, the request will get sent to all these different solvers. I believe as of today, there's 20 plus different solvers, and you can envision these as many different 1inch, many different algos for finding you the most optimal price. These solvers will either be finding the most efficient route on-chain, or plugging into market makers, or plugging into RFQ systems, or even having their own liquidity. So you can envision this as an open auction for who can get the user the best price. And whoever can get the user the best price, then they can execute it. I believe in one order on CowSwap for a user's request is going through around 45, 50 different participants, all within block builders, MEP blockers, so forth. There's a large transaction flow to be able to get the user the best surplus. So really simply put, it's just many people trying to find the best price for the user.
Yeah, and we just did a great episode with CowSwap. So like, I think if people want to learn more, let's do the latest episode or the one actually before this. But I think it would be good, like looking from your side, like how are you competing, and like where do you source all the liquidity from? Where do you get the data from? Which contracts do you call? Let's take a look from your side as the builder and how you're basically trying to outcompete the other solvers, and the users would still get the best price because of that.
It's a good question. So every solver has their own edge. That's what we've started noticing. So some people are very good at having relationships with market makers. Some people are very good at having their own liquidity. Some people are good at on-chain routing. Some people are good at DeFi routing, right? Our niche is DeFi routing, so being able to deposit directly into Aave, into Euler, into Idle, to Beefy, Aura, Balancer, so forth. That's our edge. That's what we focus on. We also do aggregate roughly, I think, 6-7 different aggregators as well, such as Odos and so forth. We plug into them to also get the most optimal price. And we also have our own pathfinding algorithm for fully on-chain. Now, what's the edge inside of these algos? Purely it's mathematicians. It's not even about integrations. It's purely PhD mathematicians that are able to find the most optimal path, the gas efficiency, price impact of being able to buy that token, and so forth across many different protocols all in one transaction.
You mentioned CowSwap, you mentioned RFQ systems, on-chain market makers. I know that solvers, so because I've been speaking with solvers, and some of them are unhappy when you're calling them on-chain market makers. Some of them are, more than fine with that. It's usually the ones that do have like centralized market making services that do consider themselves on-chain market makers as well. Can you share some light here on how would you define like a true solver, and how it's best to categorize them out there? Because it feels like there are so many definitions basically for the same thing, but maybe you can share more here. And also, if you can go a bit into the designs of the intent-based DEXs out there.
Yeah. The assumption among the solvers maybe 7-8 months ago was we're all going to be market makers. That's what we're going to do. We're all going to have our own liquidity. We're going to borrow liquidity, use this for trading. And as time goes on, we've all realized that we are, well, the people that I speak to, we're not market makers. We plug into other people who have liquidity. And I think that's how I would define a market maker, somebody that has actual exposure to assets, not people that are routing. So solvers for me are purely people that are plugging into other systems and are also doing on-chain routing. Now, as time goes on of intents, of what intents are today and what they are in the future, the solver term will get a lot more abstract, right? Like intents as of today, sadly, are I have token A and I want token B, right? But an intent could be as abstract as get me 5% APY on a protocol that has not been hacked and has 5 audits, and my exposure is only USDC, right? So the expression of what a solver does there is not only just routing, but also finding data points of what protocols do have 5%, what protocols have not been hacked that do have 5 audits. So today the term is more routing on chain, plugging into different providers to give a solution for an intent. On the different intent protocols as such, I think for me personally, it really comes down to narrative versus reality, if that's the right terminology to say it. For example, CowSwap is very open to new solvers. If you have particular edge, you can find particular added value for the user. So for example, ours is DeFi routing. There's only one other solver that does this, whereas the other systems are a little bit more closed. So for example, one of the largest names, 95% of that order flow that hits on the, let's say, the filler market is filled by private market makers, literal market makers that have their own flow, right? And then the normal solvers only get 5 to 10% thereafter. So it's kind of, we get the breadcrumbs, right? It's not really an intent ecosystem of solvers. The other one is a very closed system that only has 5 people that are also run by the company itself. So there's, let's say, different objectives within these intent networks. I think not one is better than the other. I just think the progression of these protocols is very paramount for the contribution of the solvers. So for example, CowSwap, they're very open to feedback from solvers and so forth. And this helps their protocol move even further. If you're getting all of these solvers that have years of experience saying, hey, you could improve your protocol design this way, then the protocol ultimately is going to be better. And you're going to be giving better optimizations to the user, better user experience, and so forth.
It's a good point you make, because like for now we mostly see solvers as just doing a transaction, like swap one coin to the other and just giving the best price. But it can be much more. I think you mentioned like a user wants 5% yield. Maybe they just want the best yield. And maybe there's not a condition where you say they want the best yield, but in a safe stable coin, or like one of the better ones. And this gives me the idea that a solver needs to know more about the user intent. So you need a better interface for the user to communicate with you or your API, but also that you probably have an opinion and also need like more off-chain data, not purely that yield. I'm not sure what my question actually is, but like, what would you want to see what the front end for the user would look like? So you can also express your opinion a little bit better on how it should be solved, and that expression or intent would want to be filled.
No, it's a great point to bring up, and to kind of add on to this one, once we go more into this full chain abstraction, it's actually chain and action abstraction for how to interact with protocols. Maybe protocols in the future may not even have their own interface. You know, my co-founder and I thought of this a year and a half ago. These lending protocols, it's nice for them to have their own interface, but maybe they don't have it in a couple of years and it's only fulfilled by intents. Now, as soon as you start going more into this abstracted realm of using on-chain and off-chain to fulfill a user's request, what information do you show? How do you show it? Is that information true? You know, if a user's fulfilling their request based upon malicious data presented to them, so let's say, for example, I'm presenting 10 different protocols, show their different APY to the user. That APY I presented is incorrect. They've been tricked into submitting an intent based upon falsified data. So if a malicious actor would then just start hijacking all different backends, then present this APY and so forth. A whole different other discussion. But how would this interface look like? So there's a couple of wallets that are coming out that are more AI wallets. It's using language models in the background, where you're able to just text and say, hey, I want to get 5% APY on a protocol that's not been hacked. Then underneath, this will be a language model that will interpret what the user is actually wanting, then will validate with the user and then send us off to the solver network. I envision these intents really potentially affecting decentralization of the ecosystem, which I think is already happening. Not many people talk about it. It's like, most of it's, some of it's centralized, some of it's decentralized. It's really mixed between two now. But with this off-chain element, you will get more purely settlement on the Ethereum chain. That's where this will turn into in the future.
So many questions pop here. Like, so first you mentioned that it could become way more unified, like the whole space from a user experience perspective. I do agree with that, but I do think that it's also kind of idyllic to think that this will happen, even in the next 5 years. It's the same as the debate of cross-chain versus multi-chain, cross-chain being like a unified chain abstraction where the user doesn't even care on which chain he is. I think it's the same even for same chain, where the user just has an intent where I want to get 5% for whatever, and he doesn't care on which interface he's doing that. It sounds like a winner takes it all kind of market, and I don't think that anyone is gonna permit that, even like from a VC perspective or from an execution perspective. But yeah, I'll stop here. And
I don't think it's a winner take all, right? Like, that's the whole point. It's more a collaboration at that stage, and it's who can provide the most value to the user. It's similar to the Cosmos thesis. It's similar to the Polkadot thesis. We all have individual chains, but we have a shared security layer, and each chain has its own purpose. And this is kind of where Intents will go. Each protocol will have its own purpose. It will start unifying together. It creates more possibilities of combinations. I don't think it's a winner take all. This is the whole point of blockchain. It's composability. This is composability at its true core, and will not be one person that takes the full pie of this. It's impossible. There's too much to take.
Yeah, I mean the dApp chain thesis didn't really work out, I would say, for all the Cosmos lovers out there. Have you checked? I mean, have you checked the price of Atom in the last, I don't know, 6 months?
You do know that that's not a shared security layer yet, right? Like that's so Polkadot was the ultimate bridge before bridges were even existed, right?
Correct.
And they were too ahead of themselves. Atom is still not being used, it's more of a meme and so forth. But this app chain thesis of people building chains specifically for apps and then interconnecting with others is starting.
Yeah, I guess it is starting, and with scaling solutions like the optimistic ones, it does seem like they have better traction because Polkadot and Cosmos were a bit too early. So yeah, I'm not saying that it's not gonna happen. We're on good track, but still, moving pretty slow into that direction. So now when we're talking about the whole aggregation of DeFi and unified liquidity, unified everything, who do you think will control like the end front end? Because if everyone is aggregating everyone, and for us at LeFi, it is kind of similar, although we're like in a bit different businesses. We're also aggregating other parties, like for example you. So in the end, who's controlling what and who offers to the user the best experience? Because it can be it can be LeFi, it can be Enso, it can be 1inch cow swap.
I'm not sure who's going to own the front end. I think whoever offers the best pricing will have the edge to be able to build that relationship with the product. But then thereafter, it's purely a BD game. That's all it is. I don't think there's one winner that takes all here, because everyone's going to have different edges, offer different actions, different features that the other person doesn't have.
Does that play into like that whole multi-chain, like multiple roll-ups, like that some would specialize more in specific roll-ups or specific frameworks around that, while others do purely solving on one chain? And is that like happening already? Do you see that happening, or is that something we will see in the next few years?
A lot of the cowswap solvers are on mainnet. I think we're one of the solvers that has the largest chain availability. We're deployed on about 14, 15 different chains. We're not only just doing swaps, but we're doing like lending, borrowing, vaults, LPing, and so forth, and claiming rewards. So I think the ultimate game here would be who has the most amount of actions, if available, if the conviction is Intent will abstract all of the logic of how to interact with the chain away, right? That's what we're building inside of Enso. So we're actually building a network, and this network will abstract and standardize all different DeFi actions across all EVM chains. But to deploy on many different EVM chains, like we're on 14, 15, I think there's a couple of hundred, there's going to be thousands. So you're always going to get different teams that deploy on a new chain to get that edge, to get that order flow, to be able to fulfill those user intents. So having this in a competition model with intent protocols is great for the user, because you will have somebody that will have an incentive mechanism to be able to fulfill that for you.
Yeah. And I think we mentioned earlier you're using, you're tapping into the LeFi infra. And hearing that you're live on 14 chains while others aren't means you have like some kind of edge and execution there. Like maybe could you tell a little bit, without giving away too much, like what your edge is and like why these other solvers aren't on these other chains? Yeah.
I mean, I said the edge earlier. The edge is purely DeFi. Like we do DeFi. No one really else does DeFi right now. That's our edge. The reason why we do other chains is not purely for solving intents, but also to build direct client relationships. So since we aggregate different DeFi primitives, the main problem that we're solving is how do apps such as wallets, DeFi aggregation UIs, cross-chain networks, and also DeFi protocols embed actions into the product without building everything themselves. So if they weren't to use Enso, they would spend 3-4 months for every DeFi integration. They need to build the routing, they need to build the metadata service, they need to have their own indexer, they would need to maintain all of these integrations, smart contract adapters, pay for audits, and so forth. So why are we deploying different chains is purely to help our customers expand to different chains. We had a customer that was deploying on Linea, the large marketing coordinated with the chain. We didn't know up until the same day. We deployed on Linea on the same day. So we were able to get more clients, give more value to these people as well.
Yeah, it shows that execution is an edge.
Why do you think, Connor, that there aren't more solvers and intent-based DEXs on other chains than mainnet? I know that there are some, but it doesn't. It all seems that 80% of the activity it is happening on mainnet right now. Isn't that a bit counterintuitive? Like, given that it is actually cheaper to be on scaling solutions.
Well, indirectly, this gives the users cheaper transactions on mainnet. This is also part of the calculation: who can get the maximum amount out for the tokens, and also the gas cost in relation to this. The main reason why people start on Ethereum really is it's where all of the TVL, it's where all the users are, it's where all of the order flow is. You're able to build a strong brand on the main chain and then go into different chains thereafter. I know Bebop, for example, they're going into many different EVM chains right now, and it's working really well for them. There's some people that like to just focus on mainnet, some people are starting to expand. So I think the main reason why it's only mostly on mainnet is because most of the order flow is there right now.
Do you think that all this order flow will eventually migrate? Because users are migrating, one, because it's cheaper, obviously, and secondly, thereafter, because they're looking for, better opportunities. Like, let's be honest, they're going to new chains because they want to find, basically the new shitcoin. I think like less than 1% of the users are actually interested in the tech or looking into the specifics. So, I'm asking you as someone who's doing DeFi aggregation, isn't it better to be on all of those chains, assuming that one of them is going to pop up and do like 1,000x in terms of, numbers for like volumes and so on?
I understand the thought. The way that we deploy new chains is purely based upon customer requests. We don't deploy in a new chain just on the hope the volume will come, because we wouldn't have any customers there, right? We would need to establish a new customer base and so forth. If we have 3-4 customers asking this for a new chain, then we deploy it. Unless there's an extreme circumstance, we'll deploy there anyway. A couple of weeks ago, we had 4 customers ask for a chain, and then we just deployed there. So we do it based purely on feedback. The challenge is once you deploy in the new chain, okay, you're deployed there, but since we're solvers, we're the layer underneath. Like, we're a middleman ultimately. We're aggregating, so we need people to plug into us. We don't have a front end. We do, but we don't really support it. So if we had a front end, then it would be different. We would just deploy it and see if people would use it. But since we need direct people to call our API, we only deploy based upon customer requests.
Yeah, and I think that's what more apps are doing anyway, or dApps, that they want to be on multiple chains. So they might want to integrate you for better flows for the user. How does it look for a developer? Since you provide an API, well, the developer is basically your customer. At that point, how do they integrate this, and how does the end user eventually see what you're doing or not? I think that's sometimes maybe the beauty of intents, that you don't really know that you're using like a solver or an intent protocol.
For a developer to integrate Enso, it's really simple. You go to docs.enso.finance, you can call our API and say, what protocols does Enso support? What tokens does Enso support? What actions do they support? Once you have this information, you need to find a nice way of presenting it to the user. We know that UX in Web3 is hard, but now that you have all of these options, you can create nice custom flows for the user. So let's say your user wants to lend an Aave. You would call our API and say, my user has token A and would like to lend on Aave into this pool. Whenever you make that request, we'll find the most optimal route to be able to get to that lending protocol. We will then simulate this on our tool called Temper. We open source this. It's a Rust transaction simulation tool. CowSwap uses this fully in production. They were using Tenderly and Temper. Now they only use Temper. And this gets simulated to make sure that the call data can pass the gas amount, the gas cost, and the amount out of the tokens as well. And we send this back to the application, and then the user will see call data. So, or even it can be abstracted away, right? Maybe the app doesn't want to show it, just shows the amount out and the APY that you're going to get, and then the user press submit, and then it gets executed. We currently don't do execution on behalf. We purely just build the call data. But we do have some applications that are building smart accounts, and they use 4337 relayers and so forth, so you can do gasless transactions for the users as well. But it's very convenient. Just call our API, say what actions you want to do, builds the call data, and then you can decide how you want to present that to the user.
Have you ever considered, assuming that you only touch on-chain liquidity, have you ever considered becoming, or maybe you already are in there, solving via centralized liquidity as well? Because I know that UniX, for example, allows their solvers, market makers, I'm not even sure how they call them, to touch
Sellers.
Sellers, to touch centralized liquidity as well. Pros and cons there. What's your thought process? Fillers, sorry.
We plug into RFQ providers and market makers as well. So we compare on-chain liquidity sources and also off-chain. So whatever has the best route for the user, we'll use it. That way we can always give the best pricing to the end user.
So that means that you're still routing through others that have this kind of on-chain liquidity, but you are not directly on there.
Yeah, we're not managing it ourselves. We did consider it, and we may in the future, but it's a lot of overhead. It's a whole different game. Market makers go bust all the time. It's one of the riskiest businesses in the industry, right? You're taking positions that maybe other people don't want to take, but you need to take that because you're under a certain obligation. So we do not want to have our own liquidity just for now. If we were going to do it, we would just take the top 10 assets, for example. The whole market making game is very, very different.
Yeah, but you're still calling like all of these dexes, and maybe you have an opinion on where the best AMM model lives, or where you route to the most, like algorithmically, like what design is actually best for you, or is it just on a per transaction basis that gets put forward, like, oh, we're now sourcing liquidity here, or maybe from a order book, and then from an AMM or a DEX that just has like a V2 or V3 LP?
Yes, the good question is there's not really a standard answer to it. It's really dependent upon the request of tokens, the amount of tokens as well, and how that impacts. So let's say you're doing a $10 million trade. who generally put this across 7, 8 different pools. And you may go from one stablecoin into another stablecoin, redeem that, put that stablecoin to get an LP, redeem that LP to get another stablecoin for gas optimization. There's many different hops that is done inside of this. And one thing that I actually thought about on the last question related to kind of sexes and so forth. One part of Intense has got very interesting recently that's not just about swapping, is perpetuals. So there's a protocol that's came out. They want solvers to offer perps that are listed on centralized exchanges that aren't on, let's say, DeFi landscape. And the solvers would take the other side. So if a user wants to go long, they'll go short. The solvers will go short. And then they charge a premium on top. So this bridging this gap of DeFi and CeFi, essentially, of SEX, all within one place is another nice innovation within Intense. But to kind of go to the second question, it's really dependent upon the amount of tokens. And there's no glorified answer to this. We done a transaction earlier today. It was $1 million in just one transaction. I think it was like 267 ETH. And 1/4 of that route was optimal to go with a market maker. The other ones were to go with different aggregators, and some was with their own routing algos as well. So it's really, really dependent upon the request. And you also can do some order book matching as well.
Yeah, and I think that also makes a lot of these like the prices on these dexes more efficient, because you're routing through all these pools, and it makes like the price go up at all of them. So like in the same transaction, you're arbitraging already, and without too much slippage. Is that true, or do you also, like, after such a transaction, try to do another transaction to basically fill that arbitrage yourself? Or maybe there's others doing that?
Yeah, we don't do any math. We've kind of made the decision not to, and I know a few other solvers have made that decision as well, purely because intents are the new mempool. We see the order request before it even hits the mempool. So using that information to our advantage could be a little bit malicious. So we choose to be a good actor inside of all of this. Now, it could be shown, well, if you do the arbitrage and you do it in good faith, so then give it back to the user, then that's okay to a certain degree, but we've chosen not to do that. But by splitting it across many different dexes, many different routing algos, there's not one routing algo that's better than the other. They all have their advantages. So many solver teams, once you make a request, will go through many different algos. You can do K-shorted path and so forth, but this is standard to everyone. Everyone has this. The edge really is custom algorithms built from scratch to be able to find this optimal path.
Do you see a future where we're going, which would be very similar to what we've seen in TradFi with Robinhood and Citadel, for example, where solvers will start to sell order flow?
You're trying to get me in trouble? Most of these intent networks APIs are all public anyway. I don't think many people know that. So anyone could, in theory, be selling this order flow. I don't know of solvers that are doing this right now, but I could see large aggregators that get a lot of order flow doing this in the future.
I mean, I could comment here for a second. I mean, yes, it could be possible. However, I'm thinking that it would need to be, at least one order of magnitude bigger for anyone to be interested into actually offering or buying such order flow. But yeah, I do see a future where this could happen. However, it is more tricky because rather than on a centralized app like Robinhood, for example, it's all public. So you can do this, for such long until someone will get onto you that you're doing this. So if it's done in a very public and transparent way where you're doing some kind of revenue share, and I'm sure that crypto dApps will find a way to return that surplus in a way or another, to most likely the token, their governance token that they have, and that they will make the user, stake. It's all the same as before, in which, buy the token, stake it, you'll get, a revenue share, and so on. And probably it will all be, inflationary, but that's another topic. So yeah, that might be possible.
Yeah, it's a good point on everything being open. People can prove it on chain. People like Zach XBT will find us out it and so forth. Maybe it's already happening right now. Has anybody looked at it? Has anybody created some dashboards, some analysis on it? I've not really seen that much right now. But there could be people that are already taking advantage of this. I would probably look at the largest wallets first.
Yeah, and I think that's on both ends. Like I think selling that order flow isn't a good business because the data is already on a public chain or in a mempool you can read out. But like on the other end, of course, you can be held responsible for that. And especially, I think the front ends, again, will play a role in that, where they might have an opinion on, hey, we don't want to work with you as a solver because you might not be a good actor. And I think that interplay of like basically that game theory where there's these entities are separated, where we don't have like a centralized exchange like benefiting from selling that data and then others buying that. I think that plays into, in general, just a better execution for the user.
I think you made one really good point. Kind of keeping solvers accountable. So this is already happening. Each solver is keeping each other accountable one way or another. If we notice some behavior, they will get called out essentially by another solver team. So we noticed a couple of months ago, other solver teams did as well. There was an overbidding in particular intent protocols, meaning some solvers would say, hey, I can get you for 1 ETH and get you $4,010. But at the point of execution, they would only get them 4,000 because they wanted that order flow and they were able to subsidize it through different avenues. So solvers are really keeping each other accountable. It's not even the protocols. The protocols are trying, but it's primarily the solvers. And it gets to this game theory stage where other solvers start playing the same game. We all start doing the same thing and going, well, we see you doing this, we can do it as well. And then over time, it stops. We all stop doing it because we're like, okay, well, we can all do this. It's probably better not for the user to be playing these malicious games.
Yeah, and I hope like some front ends and actually the solvers will do some research on that, where they say, okay, you basically offered this in the API call as a quote, but you filled something totally different. And I think I spoke to Matcha last week, who basically said that, being as an aggregator, that they have some controls on that, and seeing like, hey, if that quote isn't, it's too much off from what's being executed, they just revert to transaction. But I think there will be, better mechanisms, and you basically need to control this all the time, and checking if those quotes aren't like deviating too much from the actual execution. I'm very interested in this topic, actually trying to research that myself a little bit. But so far from what I've seen in my data, the aggregators themselves are actually executing quite well. There are some deviations there, but yeah, we have to dig a little bit deeper into why that happens. But it hasn't been very destructive to user portfolios, which is great to see.
Okay, we can move on to the final questions here. We're getting almost there. Maybe Connor, you can tell us more about some, if you have any, cool stories as a DeFi aggregator, top solver out there, from, I don't know, with market makers, end users, protocols, anything that you could share that would be entertaining for our listeners here.
Solvers can get hacked.
They can.
They can. Some solvers have been hacked already. If you Google or you go on Twitter, you'll be able to find it. You're putting a lot of trust into these intent mechanisms. You're delegating the responsibility of execution to other parties. These other parties don't only need to care about Web3 security, but also Web2 security. So how do you manage your private keys? How do you manage your inventory? How do you manage your algos? If they're on databases or on servers, it can get hacked as well. There's also maybe some fun stories that will start coming up, which could be DDoSing, solvers DDoSing other solvers. Maybe this happens. We've not seen it that much. We know some solvers have experience in DDoS attacks, some Web2 stuff. But this is a big part of the solver industry that people are not looking into right now. So yeah, solvers can get hacked as well.
And maybe looking forward on your roadmap, are there like any features like developers integrating you, or maybe even end users will be happy to hear and that you're building right now?
Yes, so we are currently building an executable network for all DeFi actions on all EVM chains. We have a thesis that intents will and are changing how users interact with the chain. Intents as of today are only swapping from token A to token B. So we're building our own chain, a full abstraction network, and connecting all of crypto together for developers to contribute how to interact with the protocol. Once they've contributed this action, people can consume this action, can graph this, and then validators simulate these routes to make sure there's no malicious call data. So in the next couple of months, you'll see more information come out in relation to the Enso network. It's going to be the first full abstraction layer connecting all of crypto within one place. It's decentralizing parts of the Enso stack.
That's quite huge, to be honest, like doing a whole chain, but probably needed. Is there also then a plan to go non-EVM? Because I think that's the big nut to crack, connecting EVM with, like, for example, Solana, Sui, Aptos, where a lot of users actually also want to go.
Yeah, it's a great question. The plan eventually is yes. We actually wanted to do it 3 months ago already. We were looking into some solutions that could, we could still run our own indexers on EVM and it would compile into Solana, but they weren't ready yet. So we would need to rebuild everything from scratch. So we are planning to do that, but we want to get a good base layer first, all EVM chains, and then expand over to these different non-EVM chains. It's a good testing ground with EVM. I've been full-time Ethereum for 8 years, so I'm very, very familiar with Ethereum.
Yeah, and as you said, the security is like everything. So rather take it slow with these other frameworks and other chains than to expand too quickly. I think that like finalizes this episode. Thank you, Connor, for coming on. I think the final question would be then, like, where can people find you or learn more about Enso?
Yeah, just go to enso.finance, and you can also go to docs.enso.finance. If you're a developer that wants to access 50 plus DeFi protocols without building every integration yourself, you can simply just call our API. And we also have a developer-focused Telegram group. Telegram is Enso_API. If you have any questions, the whole Enso team is there, including myself, and we just help you along the way of your journey.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that will help a lot of developers building a product faster. So check it out, I would say. Thank you for coming on our podcast. Thank you, listeners, for listening, and see you in another Days XDAO episode.
Thanks for having me. Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Deus Ex DAO podcast, a place where some of the most progressive and innovative builders, thought leaders, and traders in the crypto space come together to discuss all areas of the crypto industry. Whether you're into DeFi, Layer 1s, Layer 2s, NFTs, or anything in between, we've got you covered. And as a reminder, nothing said on this podcast should be construed as financial advice or as a solicitation to buy or sell any digital asset or security. The comments, views, and opinions expressed by the hosts or guests on the podcast are their own. As always, you'll need to do your own research.